Huntsville, Alabama, a city that has contributed greatly to the history of Alabama and the South. Because of its strategic railroad, it was occupied twice by Union troops during the Civil War. It was also the first Southern city to integrate a public school during the Civil Rights Movement. But it will always be its historic role in developing the rocket that first sent man to the moon that will forever brand Huntsville as the Rocket City. When Huntsville's tiny munition depot was chosen as the development center for Army rocketry in 1949, so began a whirlwind of activity that sent the first American to space, and then, in accordance with President Kennedy's challenge, to the moon. Led by Dr. Wernher von Braun of German V-2 rocket fame, the team's core group of experts was decidedly German. In fact, the only non-German in a leadership position at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center during this time was an engineer from South Alabama by the name of Brooks Moore, whom I had the pleasure of interviewing for this assignment. As a direct report to Dr. von Braun during the space race, Brooks led the development of the guidance and control system for the Saturn V, still the largest and most complex rocket ever developed. Together, the team's contributions to manned spaceflight are the major identifying factor of Huntsville's local public history and space exploration as a whole. Today, Brooks is the only surviving member of the original von Braun team, and at 95 years of age is still actively involved in preserving the history of Huntsville's space program. He has called the city home for over 65 years, during which time he's seen the once agricultural economy launch into a leading aerospace development hub. Over the years, Brooks has been the recipient of numerous awards, including the NASA Exceptional Service Medal, Auburn University Lifetime Achievement Award, and induction into both the Georgia Tech and the state of Alabama's Engineering Halls of Fame. As a personal friend of our family, Brooks allowed me to interview him on July 25th about his recollections of the space program from 1952 to the present day. His career started with the Redstone rocket and has spanned the entirety of the Jupiter, Saturn, Apollo, Skylab, and shuttle programs. Operation Paperclip was a secret government program to move key German scientists and engineers to the U.S. after World War II. By 1950, Wernher von Braun's team has been relocated from Fort Bliss to Redstone Arsenal, and the space race was officially on.
They were all extremely technically competent. All the way from the top. Von Braun was unparalleled, really. He was by far the world's most heralded scientist, rocket scientist in the 1940s, and he built up that great team. Because he wanted to bring 500 engineers.
He got 120, huh?
But the 1957 launch of Sputnik confirmed the fact that the Soviets were beating us to space. Brooks recalls how the United States was forced, for our own defense, to play catch-up. According to Brooks, their early rocket developments were for military use and helped back up diplomacy during the Cold War, including a key role in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
You may or may not know that one of the primes in turning those around was our rockets, our Redstone and our Jupiter. They were deployed to Europe and within range of Moscow, most of them, and they had that precise accuracy. And when the Russians started moving into the route to Cuba and establishing the rocket range and everything there, the launch sites, pointing at the U.S.
Right.
And that's when the famous phone call between Kennedy and what was his name, Khrushchev.
Yeah. Brooks says Dr. von Braun's ultimate goal was always the moon, and it was for this objective that he showed the most enthusiasm. Kennedy's famous moon speech in 1962 made it official, much to von Braun's satisfaction.
We had an advanced study group that was always looking ahead to how could they improve our rocketry and and move further into space. I mean, that was Dr. von Braun's ultimate desire. And so, as they say, he was dancing in the streets while some of the rest of us was wondering, how in the world we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Didn't try to make that one big step from the Redstone Jupiter category to the big boosters. So we built our confidence really one step at a time, and it really did take all of that time. The 9 years was by as rapidly as we could develop new elements and test them, and we use that technique. Ultimately, we use the Earth orbit circumnav to test things just as if they were in lunar orbit. But let me tell you, every step along the way was there was great concern. I mean, in particular, we were able to do some of this without an astronaut on board because our data control system was automated. We depended totally on computers that are on board. Not even by tracking from the outside and feeding that information. It was all, we could program the system from launch to go to the target. We didn't have to have any outside updating or things like that. So the fact that we were able to fly and actually test hardware before we put a man on board.
Brooks vividly remembers the butterflies associated with the Apollo 11 launch day.
Of course, there was a lot of intensity around that, and I mean, the crowds that came, hundreds and thousands, I guess. I'll have to admit there was a lot of angst, and well, I'll tell you candidly, I prayed a lot. I'll be candid. I prayed a lot. There wasn't much else we could do once the button was pushed.
Right.
As I've mentioned many times, people ask me, were you at a party? How were you partying landing on the moon? And well, I got invited to many parties to be ready, and I did not feel like I wanted to be with anybody. Yeah. We were landing on the moon, and so my philosophy was that I didn't, after they on the moon for just about 24 hours, I guess, or something like that. The first flight, a big step to get back up to lunar orbit, and this is not our part of the job. This is Houston's, and all we could do is just watch and hope, and. But they, of course, had to make that major step to get off the moon, back up to the circumnav, and check everything out, and then fire the rocket that brought them back. And my philosophy was, don't celebrate till you see the chutes open. That was the ultimate. Actually, after the lunar landing, we still went on and landed. Even though Kennedy said you send a man to the moon and bring him back alive in the decade. Yeah. But we not only put a man on there, two on the, but we went on it for the next 2.5 years. We launched another one to the moon, to land on the moon, about every 6 months. So that was a busy time.
While Brooks admits that the Apollo 11 moon landing was the fulfillment of President Kennedy's challenge, he said he'll never forget the Apollo 8 mission, which performed one orbit of the moon for the first time. This was the flight that produced one of the most iconic photos of the 20th century.
That was the first live shot of a Saturn V. We had tested everything we knew to test on the Saturn 1s and 1Bs, but Frank Borman's flight was, in my mind, almost equivalent to the landing on the moon. That was the first time astronauts had ridden Saturn V.
While Brooks stayed with NASA through the second shuttle mission, he ultimately retired and went to work as a defense contractor. In retrospect, He thinks NASA was short-sighted by placing most of its dwindling budget into the shuttle program instead of continued development of newer, more capable rocket engines. In the last year, we've seen a new type of space race, this time in the private sector. First, Elon Musk's SpaceX became the first private company to reach Earth orbit with an astronaut crew. And then, in July, both Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin flew paid passengers to suborbital space. Brooks holds SpaceX's accomplishment in high regard.
That they have solved a problem that we had in our era, and they have the fact that they can now have recoverable systems, recoverable boosters, recoverable spacecraft, and we didn't have the technology to do that. But I'd say that SpaceX has certainly taken the lead, and I can do nothing but applaud them for what they have done, because they knew what a key problem was, and they solved that before they did anything else, and that was to design and build a throttleable, that means a variable thrust engine. And that is the key to all of what's going on now.
So what do you see NASA doing in the future then?
Boy, I tell you, it's worrisome. I think NASA is in trouble. I mean, I think we've sort of lost the impetus. Things have gotten too complex, and they have made the drastic mistake of putting all the eggs in one basket as far as the space launch system.
Huntsville's research park is still filled with contractors who serve the local Army post, Redstone Arsenal, and Marshall Space Flight Center, and many of them know and revere Brooks Moore. His contributions to the local public history of Huntsville, Alabama, are unequaled in this day and age. As we enter the next era of space travel, there are many unanswered questions for NASA and the Marshall Space Flight Center. What role will NASA play in this next stage of exploration? Will Huntsville's thriving economy expand to include the private sector of space travel? Is Huntsville's role in space exploration coming to an end with the advent of SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic? Regardless of the answers to these questions, Huntsville's history will always be identified with the glory years of the space age, as Dr. Von Braun's team, including Mr. Brooks Moore, changed American history as we know it.